Welcome to the Chrisman Commentary, daily mortgage news podcast. I'm your host, Robbie Chrisman. Topics on today's episode include policy expectations for the Fed, my interview with AiCR's Joe Furlong on how intelligent document processing and automation with complex, high-volume files can help transform your operations, and without any official data due to the shutdown, how market makers are weighing the risks to inflation in the labor market. Obviously, every company wants seamlessly integrated, best-in-class solutions, optimizing every stage of the loan cycle. That's exactly what ICE does. As the standard for innovation, artificial intelligence, efficiency, and scalability, ICE is the technology of choice for the majority of industry participants, defining the future of homeownership. To see why innovation happens at ICE, visit mortgagetech.ice.com. Daylight savings time has me thinking. Is the government cutting off the bottom of a blanket and sewing it to the top, saying, see, it's longer now? Here in Austin, Texas, at the Texas Women Mortgage Bankers Fall Social and TMBA's Housing Summit, the agenda are full of speakers, not necessarily from, but discussing the U.S. government's role in housing and finance, as well as our Fed. I was asked recently the latest on what I've heard about Lisa Cook, the Fed governor, and what's going on. Is she still on the Federal Reserve's board? Well, yeah, she's still with the Fed, and the Supreme Court will hear her case, assuming we all want to follow the law and due process. But that's obviously not the main news surrounding the Fed. Because as was widely anticipated, the FOMC last week reduced the federal funds target rate range by 25 basis points to 3.75% to 4.00%, though the overall event was viewed as more hawkish than the market anticipated. In the committee's statement, there were two dissents, one favoring no cut and another favoring a 50 basis point reduction, reflecting members' diverging views on current economic conditions. The post-FOMC bearish repricing reflected a shift in the market's understanding of the Fed's reactionary nature, rather than the underlying trajectory of the real economy. 10-year yields finished a third consecutive week above 4.0%, despite intermittently dropping below that threshold. Fed Chair Powell pushed back against market strong expectations for a December rate cut, emphasizing that it's far from certain, which preserves policy flexibility amid limited official data. You can view Powell's press conference remarks as him pushing back against the market running away with a narrative that another cut is imminent, which he wasn't on board with. Some viewed it as taking matters into his own hands, and some viewed it as a shot at the Republicans to get something done about the government, aka open the government or you can kiss a December rate cut goodbye. With no data to work with, Powell signaled he's content to maintain current policy. The market-implied odds of a December rate cut have slipped down to around 60% versus 90% odds before the conclusion of the FOMC meeting last week. Without official data due to the shutdown, policymakers must weigh the risks to inflation and the labor market with the limited data available. And despite caution from missing government reports, the Fed may still proceed with a cut if there's significant clear deterioration in the labor market. Upcoming private indicators, such as the ADP employment report, will play a larger than usual role, though early signs suggest continued weakness in labor market activity. Put another way, while the Fed is going to need some reassurance that a rate cut is a prudent decision, it's likely that the committee will have sufficient data clarity to follow through on another quarter-point rate cut when it reconvenes for its final meeting of the year. The Federal Reserve's changing balance sheet reduction plans, particularly the runoff of its mortgage-backed securities, could meaningfully influence short-term funding markets such as repo rates. As the Fed allows more MBS and agency debt to return to private hands, the increased supply may push up borrowing costs for transactions using that collateral. Conversely, if the Fed slows its reduction of Treasury holdings, the added availability of Treasuries could relieve scarcity in repo markets and modestly lower Treasury-backed repo rates. Essentially, these balance sheet adjustments alter the relative supply and demand for different types of collateral, reshaping pricing dynamics across short-term funding markets. For today's interview, I wanted to welcome to the show AiCR's Joe Furlong to talk about how intelligent document processing automation with complex high-volume files can help transform your operations. He's one of the creators of AiCR, which began with a simple idea to rethink how people interact with documents and data. For too long, important information has been locked away in formats that slow us down, so he set out to create something that removes those barriers and makes the process of working with information more natural, reliable, and efficient.
I want to talk intelligent document processing. Is worth expanding on because people think, oh, well, this, AI can now read documents. Okay, well, It can, IDP is a lot more than that, especially when it comes to high volume files or complex files. When you think intelligent document processing or IDP, what does that mean in the mortgage industry?
Well, it's really an important concept. Okay, so there is a major bottleneck in efficiency around people taking documents and extracting the data. First of all, classifying those documents and extracting the data in a reliable, meaningful way. Often the systems they have are inadequate, or they don't do the job, or they just basically have a human being trailing behind it to fix all the errors. To have a successful application that actually does IDP, it's more than just the extraction and classification. You need to be able to handle a large amount of documents all at the same time. Here's an example. If someone buys a loans, for example, at 1,000 loan, which loan has 700 pages on it, you're talking hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pages it needs to process. So you need to have the infrastructure to go through that very, very quickly in a meaningful way. And the second thing is it needs to be able to extract those and classify that very, very accurately, regardless of putting into it. Some of the systems out there seen have old technology and it can do maybe 16, 20 different documents, and some of the new ones really don't have any of it. But with our system, you can throw anything you want into it, whether it's a document created yesterday, one from 1987, handwritten to be able and faxed over. It will read it and understand it. The third thing is the IDP needs to integrate into the existing workflow as well as integrate into their applications. Ultimately, the IDP is a tool or a cog in the wheel that actually helps the team be more efficient. And it's a critical part. I call it like filming up the circles and squares. How does AiCR, for example, fit in systems? How does it flow? Will control fit? So it's really a lot more than just processing the data, extracting it out, classifying it. There's multiple things that need to go into consideration to have a successful deployment of a platform, for sure.
Yeah, I do want to get into deployment here in a minute, but maybe let's dispel some common misconceptions, if you will. Kind of where do people think that IDP is versus its actual capabilities, or what can it do that might surprise people at this point in time?
That's a really good point. I would say a lot of people go out in the marketplace and they think it can handle the world, and they're promised the world, and other platforms would actually underdeliver, where they expect this type of response, and when it's all said and done, they are expecting 100% confidence 100% of the time, where no platform can offer that. But then when they go into reality, it's the documents that they expect that should work are just not doing what it needs to be doing. And then so that's the first thing. And this is where the biggest problem is trying to align expectations with what reality is. Having a system that is forward-looking, actually has a good platform, has a good interface, has to be able to do it, is really critical. To the point of the process. Outside of that, but people, so a lot of people feel that it's like platforms are over-promising, under-deliver. When I'm actually showing it, I actually throw their actual documents in the system in real time, and they actually see that it actually really works. And above that, being able to recognize handwriting as an example, not just recognize whether it's there, but actually read it, is a very important cog to be able to understand which ones are executed and which ones are not, and that sort of thing. And some of the handwriting documents that our borrowers submit, like letters of explanation and those sort of things, being able to read those are something a lot of people don't expect. And the final one is being able to ask your documents questions. So you can actually, instead of just grabbing out the data, which AiCR will do, you can actually ask your documents questions, whatever you want. And it will read the document in full and promptly respond to the answer wherever that is. Here is a simple example. I have a client that had a credit policy. And of course, typical is like 50, 100 pages long, and there's a series of statuses in it. What you can do this, it can't do that, etc. They wanted the staff to be able to ask you questions to confirm whether it's acceptable. Well, the processor underwriter can easily just ask you questions or to read the entire document and then respond with the answer. A lot of folks don't realize that that stuff is available. Now, of course, there's commercially available stats that can kind of do it, but it's more clunky. I love the commercially available stats, but having one that's fit for purpose, that is specifically designed for your documents, for your workflow in this world, is what makes a big difference. A lot of people are pleasantly surprised when they see that ability to have that lift in their process.
Is there a way to properly kind of blend quantifying it and qualifying the benefits? Because obviously you could go through the time saved or hours saved, those sorts of things. But also, you mentioned nobody is going to be 100% accurate. So what's the proper way for companies to think about ROI when it comes to these intelligent document processing solutions?
That's multiple ways to look at it. The first one is, it's not just the document. What is your confidence that document is accurate? You need to be able to look at every single data point that gets out of that document, and that each data point needs to be scored from 0 to 100. So when you're actually pushing it to a downstream application, you can say, only give me the data points that exceed this threshold. And that threshold can be customized to whatever you want. So in essence, if you're looking at a document, you can only be able to see what the system says, okay, I'm reliable, that is there. That will greatly reduce the need of your quality control person or someone down the line to actually, when they're finalizing the approval or finalizing a review, whatever the case may be, they can just focus on the small, minute issues that are questioned, while they're looking at the whole thing. I would love to be able to say that we're at a stage that it's 100% perfect 100% of the time, but that's not a realistic expectation. But if we're able to save the person's time to be able to focus on only what's needed on the small amount, that will make them more productive. It will make the cost for underwriting or reviewing a loan or auditing a loan more effective, and hopefully make the process go a lot faster. So it's multiple folds on how to make this work. And then the final thing, and I will repeat it, it's really important that data needs to just flow right into their process flow where it's normally there. So the reviewer, the auditor, whomever, can just have a normal process. It's just simple, and it goes right through the process really easily. So it's multiple fold.
And you mentioned the phrase deployment earlier in this call. I want to talk about that. And it's not limited to just IDP when it comes to deployment. Implementation, making sure employees at a company are properly trained or utilizing things properly or maximizing capabilities. It's huge for any service provider or vendor. What are best deployment practices out there? What do you see work really well versus what are things that maybe companies should avoid trying to do?
Yeah, I would say implementing any new technical solution is always a challenge. And it's mostly a challenge of making sure that the team can easily understand it. Okay, so what I always talk with my clients is saying, okay, let's figure out a way where AiCR going to be deployed in a manner where it supplements their existing workflow, meaning the amount of time the training is required for the team to get up to speed on it is extremely de minimis. It almost is just another cog in the assembly line of whatever it needs to be done. So that's the first thing that I think is the most paramount thing. And additionally, being able to seamlessly automate the task, almost try to make it as touchless as possible. Whereas documents get uploaded to the system, AiCR grabs it automatically, runs it, and does its thing, and then pushes the results back into the downstream application, where the review of the auditor can just sit there and look at it and do what it needs to do in an automated fashion, and not be jarred by all of a sudden now we have the whole new process flow that we need to do. I think that is a very critical component, and making sure that the communication between AiCR and the downstream application, what I call the circles and squares, is an important part, making sure that the communication from AiCR to the downstream application and the other way around is done in a meaningful, efficient way that takes the as much touch of humans off of that as possible to make it as streamlined as easy. So it's almost like a natural progression in the process, whether a jarring impact on how things are just suddenly happening now than it was even a week ago.
I saw that y'all had a nice catchphrase, put AiCR to the test. What about the platform? Do you feel so strongly about that? And what do you think sets it apart from its competitors?
When I was speaking to my prospects, my clients, they would say they would talk to XYZ or ABC company, and they were promised the moon, and they all got excited when it actually went into production. They really were disappointed. And I'm like, I have this attitude: don't take a word that I'm saying is the truth. I would rather meet with you, and you can give me your documents on the spot in real time with me, no prepping it whatsoever, way before you actually try to engage in the system, and we'll load it together and you can actually see how AiCR performs. So there's full transparency. There's no question what it can or can't do. And ultimately, that gives them a meaningful method to be able to move forward to the next step. Because all the sales journey is a sales journey. It's never a one meeting and it's done. We need to be able to prove and illustrate to everyone what it can do, how efficient it can work, how it's going to benefit them. It's on us to be able to illustrate that before they sign on the dotted line and before they go into production. So when they go in production, they have a full, clear, transparent idea of what it's going to do and how it's going to benefit them. The last thing that I want to do is have this process where it's opaque or unclear. They have these expectations. They go into production expecting the moon, and it turns out it's not good. And even more than that, the way we actually enter in the business agreement with our clients, there's no minimum duration. So even after all that spot where they see the transparency, they see exactly how it works, if we actually go into production and it proves not to be the right fit for them, fine. No harm, no foul. You don't have to use it anymore, and there will be no cost to it, unlike being saddled with a 3 or 5 year term commitment.
And finally, before I let you go, best next steps for people that are interested in learning more, best ways to get a hold of you, contact, those sorts of things.
That's wonderful. I would say we're active on LinkedIn, both on the AiCR. If you just search AiCR, AiCR on LinkedIn, or you can search me on LinkedIn. That's Joe Furlong. You'll find me. Our website is AiCR.io. Those are the best ways to get a hold of me. Willing to talk to anyone anytime, just to have a conversation and see how it works out for you.
I've perused the website a little bit, and I think y'all are doing some really neat things. So wish you the best of luck there, and thank you very much for making the time for me today.
Thank you, Robbie. I appreciate it.
This week's economic calendar would have included the October jobs report on Friday, but it will be delayed due to the government shutdown, along with construction spending, the trade deficit, factory orders, jobless claims, productivity unit labor costs, and wholesale inventories. Ugh. That leaves PMIs, ADP employment, challenger job cuts, Michigan sentiment, and consumer credit as the reports set for actual release. Treasury supply consists of just T-bills, though Fed speak picks up after last week's FOMC decision. Outside of the Fed, markets will digest the latest central bank decisions from the RBA, Riksbank, Bank of England, and Norges Bank, with current odds favoring no change for all four. Regarding mortgage-backed securities, agency prepayments will be released after Thursday's close and into the evening, and Class A net out is on Friday. Today's economic calendar kicks off later this morning with October manufacturing PMIs from S&P Global and ISM. The only other events of note will be remarks from San Francisco Fed President Daly and Governor Cook. We begin the week with agency MBS prices, little change from Friday's close, the 2-year yielding 3.58, and the 10-year yielding 4.09 after closing last week at 4.10%, up 10 basis points over the course of last week, but down 5 basis points from where it began October. Let's wrap up with a joke and some housekeeping. The Texas State Police are cracking down on speeders heading into Houston. For the first offense, they'll give you 2 Houston Texan tickets. If you get stopped a second time, they make you see them. Hey, Cowboys fans, aren't you glad I didn't make that about the Cowboys? Thanks again to ICE for sponsoring this week's podcasts. As the standard for innovation, artificial intelligence, efficiency, and scalability, ICE is the technology of choice for the majority of mortgage participants, defining the future of homeownership.